Welcome back to the Dr. Joe Show. I am your cigar doctor, and I am more excited than ever to be here back in front of you all. It's been over a year since we've added a video to the Dr. Joe Show channel, and there is an explanation behind that. But I gotta say, in all that time, even without adding a video, we've climbed up to nearly 400 subscribers. Now, by YouTube standard, that's not a lot, but to me, that's 400 people who are interested in hearing what I have to say about cigars and Cuban cigars, and that means a lot to me, more than you'll ever know. The last year has been a struggle. The cigar shop that I worked at for over 5 years closed down rather unexpectedly. Pretty short notice, a few months, and that was it. After being open for nearly 20 years. It's a real shame, and it doesn't really have to do with a lack of interest in cigars. It has to do with an excessive interest in money on the part of people who rent real estate, especially in New York City. People came by, tripled the lease, which made it completely unaffordable, and the shop closed. So, no job, no money, no cigars, no Dr. Joe Show. But after the past year, passing and all, things are looking up, and I really want to thank all of you who have subscribed and therefore will know when these new videos are produced, and thanks for sticking with us, and that's that. We got a ton of great stuff coming your way, everything we do. Fake or fine, we're going to take a look at a few more sites. We are going to look at more cigar collectibles, mostly jars. We got regional editions, we got aged cigars, we got cigar reviews coming up, and I think it's just going to be a great year. The interest in cigars overall is not dying. If anything, it's expanding at an incredible rate. I do. I mean, for one thing, once a person is introduced to the cigar culture and the cigar community, it's hard to not want to be a part of something that great. My interest in cigars is more powerful than ever. Losing that job to me was like, I don't know. At my level, I don't have children, but it was like losing a child. I mean, I was devastated. That was not just my job, it was my hobby and my life, my number one interest above all things. So I could ramble on here forever, but in essence of coming back and doing the first new video, why don't we get right down to a review? Rather interesting one. Actually, it's kind of like a triple threat, because if any of you who've watched my other videos know that I'm big into collecting the jars, and one of the jars that has eluded me, unfortunately, due to a failed bank transaction, and then the jar was sold out, was the Upmann Magnum46 jar. By no means the rarest jar in the market, but let me tell you something, it's very hard to come by, and being that the cigars in the jar are now almost at a vintage status, the prices for the remaining jars have gone up excessively. You're looking at anywhere between $800 to $1,000 for this jar now on the market. This jar was originally $400 to $500 when it came out. And the jar I got is actually rather special. It's a long story. Well, not really. It's just a... I'd make it a long story, but what we're going to do is take a look at all of that. I'll explain it to you once you see the cigars. So that's that. Why don't we get started, and I can get into some more of what's going on and what we can expect in the year to come. Thanks for watching. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back to the Dr. Joe Show. Today we have two different cigars. They are both H. Upmanns. They are both Magnum46s, but they are by no means the same. And we're going to go over what I'm talking about, which is going to allow us to look at some knowledge concerning vintage cigars and what to look for when buying vintage cigars, or how not to get ripped off buying vintage cigars. Before we get into everything, let's go over a few things about the H. Upmann brand. One of my personal favorites, H. Upmann went to Havana in 1840. He was a banker, and during a few years that he was there, he realized he could make a lot of money. It would be very profitable for him to open up a company where he could actually use his company to produce and especially distribute Cuban cigars. And so in 1844, H. Upmann was born. At that point, it was not a global brand. It was not one of the big shots like Monte Cristo or something like that. It was a multi-local brand. H. Upmann is, being established in 1844, is one of the oldest in production Cuban brands today in history. Being that it's 2014, it makes this brand 170 years old. And during that whole time, it has done incredible things in the world of Cuban cigars. Jumping ahead in history, it was one of the favorite cigars of President John F. Kennedy. And a lot of you know this, but many people know the story as the night before the Cuban embargo, he ordered 1,200 Cuban cigars for himself. And that's just a story, being that, see, they did the embargo, but he couldn't resist having himself anyway. The truth is that he didn't order the cigars from Cuba. He had someone go out and gave them the order to procure as many, his words, every box you can find. Now, that's a lot more than 1,200. The number actually does come to 1,200. But being that Cuban cigars were legal, they were being sold in Washington, D.C., he had someone go out and go to every cigar shop in the area and procure every single box of H. Upmann cigars they could find. And that number came to 1,200. And that just shows, like, hey, I can't do without these things. It would have been a sad day if he had the time to run out, unfortunately. So H. Upmann is one of the few brands. It is an excellent, excellent cigar for aging. It's a mild to medium-bodied cigar. And most people like to say that it's the heavier-bodied cigars that are good for aging. But H. Upmann is one of the only brands to score a perfect 100 from Cigar Aficionado, not once but multiple times. And Cigar Aficionado is not my Bible, but for any cigar to get a perfect 100, that's really unheard of. And yes, they were mostly vintage cigars. I think they were all vintage cigars. Usually in that little connoisseur's corner, they have like 4 or 5 cigars they got their hands on somehow that we'll never be able to smoke. I love that. But yeah, amazing cigars. Anyway, it was a multi-local brand until in 2005, H. Upmann made a rare move. Most of the brands at the time, I think it started in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, with Cohiba, when they started doing the edition limitadas. And only the global brands were doing this. Cohiba, Romeo and Juliet, Monte Cristo, and H. Upmann was not a global brand. Anyway, in 2005, they released an edition limitada, the EL 2000 H. Upmann 2005, and it was a massive hit. And at that time, like right after that, H. Upmann then became a global brand. So it really wasn't that long ago until they became worldwide. When you think about, well, how big is multi-local? It's not very big. There's only one production shorter than that, and that's local, strictly local. And those are like brands like Gloria Cubana, which are the hardest to get. That's why every year at the beginning of the year you'll see people carrying Metal de Oro number 2s and 4s and whatever is left in production, and then in a few months they're gone until next year. H. Upmann is now global. So, and I'm glad for that, because it is one of my favorite cigars, and aging it to me has proved to be very, very successful. So the edition limitada, the 2005 edition limitada H. Upmann, is really a historic cigar. It's the last release that they produced when they were still a multi-local only brand, and it is the only edition limitada to be released by a company that was not global at that time anyway. A lot of people ask, what does the H in H. Upmann stand for? And there are a few different stories behind it. I went trolling the net and I came up with a few things. One, the 2 brothers, the Upmann brothers, their names were Hermano and Augusto, I think it is. And so that the H may stand for Hermano. Okay. The other one is that the last name was actually Hupmann. Upmann, and they thought that Upmann was more of a, aesthetic, had more of an aesthetic appeal as a brand name, so they named the brand Upmann. Don't know, but it definitely doesn't stand for Henry Upmann. And a lot of people tell you, hey, Henry Upmann's, or they're thinking of Henry Clay or whatever when they came in the cigar shop. That's sad, but yeah. So let's get to the cigars. I mentioned before the Magnum 46 jar. I did not bring it down here in the only area I can smoke in the building because it's cold down here, and I do not want these cigars to go out of their climate as they are aging. This was released in 2010. 5,000 jars produced for Western Europe, unnumbered jars. And at the time they sold for about $400, which is about 100 something more dollars, 150 more dollars than a cabinet box of 25 Magnum 46s. And very quickly, because I guess how beautiful the jar was, and it was a pretty good deal, this was before jars became blown up. They're really blowing them up now as far as prices go, man. Oh, that's unbelievable. This jar now will cost you anywhere from $800 to $1,000, starting at ridiculous prices. Some of them holding cigars that are available in different ways, in boxes outside the jar. But they are making less of them, so less, worth more, I don't know. Anyway, the Magnum 46, wonderful cigar. They made these jars, and I had just started collecting at the time. And I missed my opportunity on this jar. And long story short, I was able to find the jar, but it was empty. One guy had it empty, box and everything. Fine. He said, "I'll put a box of Magnum 46s in there for you." Now, this is a guy I completely trusted, and he also said, "Problem is, I don't have any Magnum 46s. The only thing I have is vintage Magnum 46s. So I tell you what, pay me for the vintage box, and I'll give you the jar with it. Done deal." And so I got a jar full of 30. Actually, it was 20. He gave me 25 because it's a box of 25. I got 25 cigars. So if you go online and are looking for this jar now, it is available at a couple of different sites, but you're not going to pay less than $800. It's going for $800 up to $1,200, believe it or not. Is it worth it? Well, I don't know. It's about to become a vintage cigar. If you're getting the cigar that came originally in the jar, it's about to be vintage, 4 years. But no, by no means is a box of 4-year-old Magnum 46 is worth that much. It's a beautiful jar. That's the going rate. I mean, so these are what, and it's like, if you want it and this is all that's left, that's what you're going to pay. So, anyway, when I got the jar, like I just said, my cigars were vintage. And he gave me the date and year, but I'm not even going to say it right now because we're going to go over a few things on how to pinpoint approximately how old a certain cigar is when you can. And here's the knowledge we're going to use. Magnum 46s aren't new cigars just because they made a jar. The Magnum 50 was a new addition to the line at the time. The Magnum 46 is an older cigar that was packed in cabinet boxes of 25 and or 50, and they were unbanded. Before 2006, they had no bans. Then, as things were undergoing changes, especially, remember, 2000 up to 2006, before 2005, or the end of 2005, H. Upmann wasn't a global brand. After they became global, I guess that might have something to do with why they decided to start putting bans on everything. And at first, there are 3 different bans, okay? At first, there were no bans. Then, right after 2006, they started using the regular brown band that you're probably familiar with seeing on H. Upmann number 2s, the torpedoes. And that was that for a while. Then, they made the new band. And the new band looks like this, okay? That's the one, if you go online and look up H. Upmann, 90% of their cigars are going to have that band on it, okay? And that was in this interim between 2006 and 2008, because we know on or right after 2008, that is when they started adding the Magnum second band to their Magnum cigars, Magnum 46. So, in looking at this cigar, even though it has the same band as this one, we can tell that, okay, if they had no bands before 2006, brown bands came in 2006, and then It wasn't until 2000, and then they changed to this band, and then it wasn't until 2008 that they started using this band. Then we know that this is between 2006 and 2008. We can also say that they used brown bands for a while, so it was probably around 2007 that they changed to this band. So therefore we have a cigar that is most likely definitely before 2008, probably after 2007. Not bad. So, and it's not that hard to do if you have the information. Now, here's another thing you may be asking. Well, it might just be missing the secondary band. Yeah, very good observation. However, the quality of the new bands was more akin to all the old bands with the lesser embossing before they upgraded. It's when they changed to the second band here that they really upgraded the new band, and it started showing higher end embossing. You're really not going to be able to see this closely, but I'll explain it to you. The bands here, okay, certain areas, I guess people call it the clamshell, the gold leaves up here, the dots all around, they are embossed. They are embossed. Now, if they weren't embossed at all, it's a fucking fake band, so be careful. But they are embossed. But they're embossed, I wouldn't say they're lightly embossed, they're not really pronounced, but by no means are they fake. Okay, this is definitely a real cigar. The new bands are really well pronounced. All the I call it trellis, and all the dots and all the little lines up here, and the leaves, everything, and the shell, everything is embossed very, very well. So we know that on this vintage cigar here, it's definitely not a new cigar with the band removed. And how can that screw people up? Well, here's how. If a shady guy has a old box, like I have 3 old boxes of H. Upmanns from 2007, 2008, and somebody wants to buy a vintage box, 2008 Upmann Magnum 46s, it's now 2014. So that 6-year-old box, it's, you get an extra penny for it. You can easily remove these footer bands, put in new cigars into the old box, and make a couple extra bucks. So, when you're buying vintage cigars, you definitely want to know what to look for. Don't think they're going to look just like the cigars in current production. They really may not. A lot of people get mad and email me and say, I just ordered a box of La Gloria Cubana Metal de Oros, and they're brand new, and the embossing is terrible, the bands look fake. La Gloria Cubana never upgraded the bands on their regular series. On their regional releases, you'll see the new Gloria bands with the pronounced embossing and everything. Here's a great example of bands that look exactly the same, except the embossing is way different. And they're not exactly the same. There are a few different things, Habana Cuba instead of just Habana. But the old La Gloria bands up to today, if you get a box of Metal de Oro number 2s and the bands look beautiful and they're all embossed nicely and everything, then they're fake, because Metal de Oro 2s do not use those bands. So you have to know what you're looking for. Anyway, the differences you can see also in the cigar itself as far as being a vintage cigar. The newer cigar is much lighter. Now, different batches of cigars can be darker, okay? It doesn't mean that it's vintage just because it's darker. However, aged cigars may take on, if they're not exposed to light the whole time, especially UV light, which can really damage wrappers. I love cigar shop humidors that have UV lighting. You see how faded all the wrappers get. The wrapper is darker, with a lot of even darker kind of spots and everything, which is oils coming up through the wrapper. That's a sign of aging. If you look closely, which you can't see on this camera, you'll see a little bits of crystalline kind of like fuzz. Not mold looking like fuzz. That's not plume, that's mold. Okay? That's white mold. Doesn't mean your cigar is dead, just brush it off, it'll be fine. If it gets in the foot, most likely it'll alter the taste in a damaging way, in a very bad way. But plume is different. Plume looks more like crystals, okay? If you want to see a good example of plume, you could probably find some right now at your cigar shop on some of the higher end Padron cigars. If you look closely at the wrappers, you'll see little crystalline type stuff. That's from aging, all right? It's on the vintage cigar, not on this new cigar. And that right there shows you, okay, this cigar is definitely older. Anyway, that's a little history lesson on H. Upmann bands and what to look for and everything. And I guess since we have these two cigars, we're going to light them up, and we're going to see what differences we can find in flavor, if at all, if any better flavor has developed. Now, I'm a pig, so I'm going to start with the vintage cigar. I think you should probably start with the newer cigar and then move to the vintage cigar to notice a better, flavor, but I'm going to go with the vintage cigar here. Also, one other sign of aging, I'll just, again, on this band, you'll see some dark spots, all right? Some kind of blackish I don't know what happened. My thing stopped recording and I lost the light. But anyway, I lit up this wonderful cigar. I wish you could have seen my impressions of it. It's absolutely delicious, okay? It just started out with this delicious sweet aroma. I lit it with a match, not a torch. You don't want to light a vintage cigar or with a torch. You really miss out on that. It smelled like wonderful sweet baking bread. And once I got it lit, it had some initial spice to it, which was interesting. Very little, like in the back of the tongue, prickly kind of, your taste buds waking up kind of spice. And overall, it has a very caramelly kind of cocoa bean flavor. Very, very, very delicious. It's great. I'm still smoking it, and will be for about half an hour. So why don't we talk a little about stuff? I'll try to talk a little about what I was talking about to the camera for 15 minutes when the thing went off without me knowing. But I don't know where I was with that. Anyway, one thing I want to show you real quick is, look at the ash on that. I'm going to come over here. This is when I realized the camera went off. I came over and said, oh, great. You see that? That is a Cuban Ash. Okay? See that? It's a little, because of the light, it's actually showing up lighter than it is. It's very black and gray and charcoaly. Alright? And, has that rough kind of flaky pattern. Definitely not white. It's showing up a lot lighter than it is on this camera. Let me see if I can... Oh, great. Now you can't see it at all. You see, it's that stupid bright... What do you call it? Light. Anyway, that's a Cuban Ash for you. Should look like that, but it should be darker than what you're seeing. Anyway, so much for that. As you can see, wonderful burn, perfectly around. I mean, tastes unbelievable. Just a wonderful, smooth, gossamer kind of feel to it. Wonderful aroma, very floral, very sweet. Through the nose, it doesn't burn at all and has a very, very floral kind of fragrance. It just has a ton of flavor. Really, really great. Talk a little bit about this and that. One of the biggest emails, most emails I get from people are, who do you trust? Who are the people you buy from? Give me a list of people. And I tell them, here's the list. It's the same as the videos I just, put online. There are no secrets here. And this one guy comes, I know it's vendors that you buy from that you're not mentioning. Dude, I'm not mentioning them because they don't want to be mentioned. There are certain sites that will not ship to you. They just won't. All right? Let's put it that way. And, I'm not holding out. All right? It's just that there's not, it wouldn't be right for me to put online somebody who doesn't want me to say their name or put them online. Okay? And that's that. And that's why it's so important for each and every one of you individually to get behind the scenes of this whole thing, this whole machine that's going on here. The culture, the community. Start talking to the vendors. Start getting to know the names of the guys behind the vendors. Talk to them personally about what they like, what they collect, who they can refer you to if you're looking for this and that and the other thing. If you get a referral from a vendor to another vendor, the other vendor will probably say, okay, this guy, okay, legit, fine. But if you just barge in with an email, say, oh, you have this jar I need, I want it so bad, they're not going to fucking send it to you if they, they're just not. The sites in London, the sites in England are infamous for not shipping to the United States. Infamous. Do I know a few? Yeah. Yeah. But you have to be referred. You have to be trusted. You have to know your sources. And so that's that. So if I do a video on a certain box of cigars and I don't mention where they came from, it's because I got them from somebody that, but most of the time, I will tell you who they came from. And that's what the Fake or Find series is for. That series concentrates on good vendors, not good vendors, Other series concentrate more on the actual cigar or, the actual collectible, whatever. This is just wonderful. It's got such a just dynamite flavor. We got the other one here with the band, the newer one, and yeah. So we pinpointed that this was 2007, and yes, by the way, I do know the date, by the way, and it is 2007. I forget the exact month, because in 2008, early on, that's when they started adding these bands. So you could say any H. Upmann with this band, without this band, is pre-2008, okay, or early 2008 or before. But be careful and remember what I said, that if it's only this band, it shouldn't be really, really well embossed and crisp. It should be like, embossed, but not like the new bands are, all right? So just be careful of that. We're going to smoke that one later and see how it compares to this one, but so far, I don't think it's going to hold a candle. A lot of people ask, is it worth aging your cigars? It costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of maintenance. It's a hassle. It is worth it, man. It really is. When you get a box of, say, certain cigars, like I mentioned before, H. Upmann's one of those brands just great for aging. Same thing with La Gloria Cubana, They just develop such an amazing bouquet of flavors. And if you're patient enough, if you can buy a box of Metal de Oro number 2s or Magnum46s and not burn through them real quick, that's what I like to try to do. First, I buy the cigars I want to hold and smoke, in a few years. Then I buy the cigars that I'm going to smoke right away. And a lot of times, once I buy the cigars I'm going to hold, I don't have money left to buy the cigars I want to burn. I'm not a millionaire or anything. I'm just insane as far as collecting cigars go. I will spend every last penny I have on freaking cigars. And, people I know, like, there are so many problems in developing collections, including the people part. There's people who say, you have 9 jars, what do you need another one for? I can't believe you're spending all this money on this stuff. All right, well, you know what? That's just me. I collect these jars. I love doing it. This collection means more to me than just about anything, okay? I was talking before about how these jars have gone up in value so much already, and I knew they would, and that's why I was not just the point. First of all, it's not just a jar, it's cigars. You're getting a bunch of cigars that are going to age and become more valuable as time goes on. You get a box of good cigars and age it 10 years, it's worth at least double what you bought it for. Then the price becomes exponential. You age it for 15 years, 20 years, that's a very expensive box of cigars. Some people ask, well, how long should you age a cigar? What's the maximum? A lot of people say, and this is a lot of different experts put a lot of different averages together, and they say 19 years is ideally the cutoff point for aging. After that, they say the flavor starts to diminish, the cigar can die, But some cigars don't, depending on how they're stored and how much they're handled. If you have a box of cigars and you open it and play with it every day and roll them around and God knows showing people, who knows, bringing them into cold, hot, I don't know. That box of cigars is not going to age like a box of cigars left in a humidor at 70/70 for 19 years. A box of cigars like that, which doesn't move, is going to age much better. When you're aging at home, you have to open up your cigars occasionally because in case, you find mold, or God forbid, bugs, And you don't want to just leave them because in 19 years you may find nothing but a forest when you open your box, and that wouldn't be good. So 19 years max, which means between 7 and 13, 14 years is the peak time. Okay? That's what they would call peak time. And that's when most of the stuff you don't want is gone and most of the attributes you do want are there. So that's something to think about, you know. Like we said, this cigar, 2007, H. Upmann Magnum 46. So right now it's 7 years old. You know, depending on the month, it could be 6 and change. But, and let me tell you, wow. Wow. When I smoke this cigar, I think to myself, I don't think it can get much better. I don't think there's anything that I would want. I'm not smoking it saying, could use a little more sweetness, could use a little more, you know, depth. This could use a little more nothing. All it could use is a little more smoking. That's about it. What the hell were we talking about? Yeah, so at this point, I think this cigar is really, really coming into its prime. And I'm probably going to, you know, it's going to be hard to sell a jar of Magnum 46s with cigars from when you don't have proof. We do have proof. Through the bands, you can tell that they're after 2006 and before 2008 for sure. All right, so there's that. But I like these so much. This may be a staple cigar for me. The H. Upmann Magnum 46. Not too mild, not too strong, perfect, balanced, medium body, very, very deep cocoa bean and caramel type of flavor. I say caramel because it's what comes to mind. I mean, you know, I can't really put my finger on some of the exact flavors I'm getting here, but a beautiful base with a lot of different surprises and high notes as you're smoking it. Wonderful floral bouquet through the nose, very gentle. I don't think I could do anything to make this cigar better. So I'm probably going to start burning through these, and in the future I will buy a box of Magnum 46s while they still look the same and put them in here, +5 because it's a jar of 30, and then keep them and age them for a good, you know, however many years until I either sell the jar or smoke them again myself. But like I was saying before, if you have the patience and the means to buy a box of cigars and let it sit, do that. You will not be disappointed. You really will not be disappointed. One of the best cigars I ever smoked was a Gloria Cubana Taino from 1998. Fantastic. Fantastic.